There's a lot of uncertainty heading into the Scott Satterfield era, but that doesn't mean it will not be successful. I'll explain.
Are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Happy Friday. We are rounding out a great week here on Locked On Bearcats. We're up to over 700 subscribers on YouTube. How about that? So thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including right here on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, and you can follow it to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is Alex Frank, your host each and every day, right here on Locked On Bearcats. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Cincinnati Bearcats are entering a new era. They are entering the Big 12, and Russ brought this up in our live room on Wednesday, which thank you to all of you who came out during your lunch break, or if you were just needing something to do, to join us and talk some Bearcats with yours truly and Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. Russ brought this up on Wednesday, saying that Scott Satterfield can just as easily lead the Bearcats in 3 years to a Big 12 championship, or maybe beyond that, as opposed to being run out of town in 3 years. And I do think that that is correct, because we simply don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect from the Bearcats in the Big 12, let alone what a Scott Satterfield coached Bearcats team specifically is going to look like. We know what Scott Satterfield did at Louisville. I'm going to touch on that here in a few minutes, but we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how he's going to use the talent that's on this team with his system, and how that's going to mesh together. Hopefully it does. But here's how I look at it. Year one of the Big 12 is going to give us a sense of where this program could be heading. Year two is going to tell us where this program will be heading. And year three is going to cement the status of the program under Satterfield, right? You have 3 years, I believe, as a program, a quarterback, you have 3 years to really cement yourself as far as who you are. Patrick Mahomes, for instance, by year three, he was already a Super Bowl champion, MVP, and then he took the Chiefs to another Super Bowl. Joe Burrow is through his third season, and he's taken the Bengals to 2 conference championship games. So we know Joe Burrow is a great quarterback. He has cemented himself. The Bearcats, in year 3 under Luke Fickell, cemented themselves as a championship caliber program. And what I mean by that is they had played for a conference championship game. I always like to use the 3 years for programs, college, head coaches, NFL quarterbacks. That's how I view it. So the Bearcats are entering their first year in the Big 12 and first year under Scott Satterfield. It doesn't feel right now like this program is stable. There's a lot of uncertainty, but I think a lot of it is anticipation. To go into the Big 12, what is this offense going to look like? Is the defense still going to be the same? There's a lot of questions. I don't think we expect the Bearcats to be terrible. Most of the comments I'm seeing are, you think that the Bearcats are going to go 6-6 or 7-5. And I think either one of those would be a successful season. I have them at 8-4 currently. That might drop. But I just think a lot of us are anxious about what's life going to look like. We're excited to see teams like Baylor and Iowa State and West Virginia on our schedule, as opposed to USF, East Carolina, and name any other school. But at the end of the day, we don't know how the Bearcats are going to fare against those teams, and it's okay to feel that way. But here's something interesting. And when I was coming up with today's topics for the show, this struck a chord with me. Scott Satterfield took over for Louisville the year after the first season in the post-Lamar Jackson era. The 2018 Louisville offense. Now, here's what's interesting. So Lamar Jackson leaves after the 2017 season. Louisville averaged over 500 yards a game offensively, nearly 550 yards. The 2018 Louisville offense had dropped almost 200 yards per game offensively. Enter Scott Satterfield in 2019, and they improved by nearly 100 yards offensively per game. And they stayed, excluding last year, around 445 yards per game. Last year, they averaged 406.2. Scott Satterfield had rebuilt the Louisville program within 1 year and took them to a bowl game 3 times in 4 years. Last year, the Bearcats averaged just 372 yards a game offensively. That was down from 2021 by about 40 yards. In 2020, they averaged 451. The point here is this. With the offense that Scott Satterfield is going to bring, with an emphasis on the quarterback, I think he can elevate him. Look at Malik Cunningham in 2019, his first season as a Louisville starter. 22 touchdowns, 5 picks, 482 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns. That gives you hope for a guy like Emory Jones or Evan Prater. Now, there's obviously concern with the offensive line. In 2019, Louisville was tied for 127th in sacks allowed with 43. Did I mention that there were only 130 teams in college football that year? Louisville gave up just under 3.5 sacks per game. That, my friends, is not very good. But for year one, if Emory Jones can showcase his dual threat abilities, this offense will have a chance. Why? Because Louisville averaged almost 450 yards a game with their offensive line in 2019. At the Bearcats' offensive line, we don't know who's going to start outside of maybe Gavin Gerhardt. I think Luke Cantra is going to be a starter. Maybe some of the other transfers will land starting jobs. But it is so up in the air right now. Offensively, it's going to be a challenge. I think we can all agree on that. If Brian Brown, new defensive coordinator, if his defense this year with the Bearcats can do what Louisville's defense last year, this team is going to have a chance to win every single game. I truly believe that this team is going to be in every single game they play in this year because of their defense. It will be much harder against a more balanced league offensively, but defense is the great equalizer in this case. Look at what Kansas State did to TCU in the Big 12 championship. That physical defense, they made Max Duggan work for everything in that game. He was gassed by the end of that game. The Bearcats can be in every game if the defense is what it was last year, and Brian Brown brings what made the 2022 Louisville defense so good last year. So, again, the uncertainty is understandable. It's palpable. It's relatable. I feel the same way. But I am taking an optimistic approach because of what Satterfield was able to do with Louisville offensively in his first 3 seasons. And that's with an offensive line in 2019 that wasn't very good. That's the same case this year. And Louisville in 2019 did make a bowl game. In fact, Louisville was incredibly successful in 2019. Louisville that year, coming off a 2-10 season, they finished 8-5. They finished 8-5. They lost their first game to Notre Dame. They went on the road, or they went back home rather, beat Eastern Kentucky. That was obvious. They went to Western Kentucky, won that game. That game was played in Nashville, actually. Lost to Florida State. They beat Boston College. Again, they beat Wake Forest 62-59. Got pummeled by Clemson. Clemson was so good that year, though. Beat Virginia, beat NC State, beat Syracuse, who was still good at the time, and then won their bowl game against Mississippi State. 7-5 in his first season, and then winners in the Music City Bowl. And you're just going to dismiss that? I think you have to understand Satterfield did a good job at Louisville. He never improved or built off that 2019 season, but it was stable. And that's what this Bearcats program needs. All right, coming up, I'll break down the quarterback battle from an angle I used to describe last year's. We'll get into that after I tell you why this episode of Locked On, or how rather, this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. I'm so excited to have them partner with us, especially ahead of Super Bowl 57, because this year the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited. Let me try that again. America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel so you can bet your Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat. Bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. Chiefs, Eagles, Super Bowl 57. Again, I like the Eagles right now, still a 1.5 point favorites. I like them to cover that. Over under at 50.5. I'm going to take a very slight over on that. So again, with FanDuel, the FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. See, this is why they are America's #1 sportsbook. How about that? The FanDuel app, is easy to use. So join the day at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Back here on Locked On Bearcats, Alex Frank with you, your host each and every day, right here on Locked On Bearcats. We are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, I said in segment 1 that year 1 of the Big 12 would be about setting the tone for what the program could look like. The quarterback battle is a huge part of this. And you for sure have to know who your quarterback is going to be going into the season. But I also feel like you have to feel good about your quarterback room going into 2024. So this season will be important for the starting quarterback, whoever that is, which right now I would say Emory Jones, but also for guys like Drogosh and Prater. Keep in mind, Jones only has 1 season left of eligibility. So the focus is on making the most of this season while also ensuring the quarterback room going forward is in a good spot. If Jones is good, you're going to play him, right? And the good news is this. Brady Drogosh is only a freshman, but Prater's time is running out. That's another unique storyline of this offseason that we're going to touch on. Evan Prater's time is running out, but he's got a lot of competition. So what's the best outcome? Obviously winning, but I think there should be an emphasis on multiple quarterbacks getting playing time. Because Emory Jones only has 1 season of eligibility, it's great if he ends up having a great season, but he's not going to be able to come back. And then if he plays the whole season and you don't see Drogosh or Prater, because Ben Bryant is also done after this year, and I don't think he's going to fit in Scott Satterfield's system, because there should be opportunities for Drogosh and Prater to play because they are the focus of the future. Prater is gone. After this year, he's gone. Once again, the quarterback battle is not only important for this season, but there will be some ramifications for future seasons. That's how I view this. That's how I view this quarterback battle. You want to make sure you have your starting quarterback for this season. But knowing now, Drogosh or Prater could win. Bryant could win. I think Ben Bryant starting would be the worst case scenario because he's leaving after this year, but he doesn't bring anything as far as dual threat abilities. I don't think so, at least. I think you need an athletic quarterback like Louisville had in Malik Cunningham, like the Bearcats have with Drogosh, Prater, and Emory Jones. But again, Drogosh is only a freshman, so he has a lot of time to learn. But I think about a guy like Evan Prater, who last year it was between him and Ben Bryant. This year, it's him versus everybody versus a lot more. He's going to be up against at least 3 different quarterbacks, Jones, Bryant, and Drogosh. But maybe that's good for him because it feels like so long ago when he committed and there was so much excitement. There was so much anticipation for when he would play, how he would play. Would he be as prolific of a quarterback at this level as he was in high school? And we haven't seen that yet. Now, he hasn't had the chance, which is not all on him. His first 2 seasons, he was playing behind Desmond Ridder. Last year, he had his chance. He didn't win the starting job. Ben Bryant did. It ultimately worked out for the better. Prater did start 2 games. There were some good things. There were also some not good things. I will say that I still believe in Evan Prater. I think his first 2 starts came in a very, very adverse time. And all this talk that I have given, and potentially other members like Russ, like anybody else who covers the team, they might tell you that Emory Jones is the leading candidate. But Evan Prater, if you think about this, Evan Prater's first 2 starts came in a must-win game against Tulane, which I don't care if it's Nick Foles in Super Bowl 52 or name me another situation when a quarter like Jeff Hostetler in 1991. Name me a situation where a backup quarterback is thrusted into a must. Josh Johnson this past week with San Francisco. I don't care what it is. What I do know is that Evan Prater has not really gotten the opportunity to grow, to settle into his role as a starter. His second start came in the Fenway Bowl. I mean, do you know the situation the Bearcats were in? They had nobody playing that game. They had players changing numbers during the game. That's not a situation I would want to be in as a starting quarterback. So again, there is still for Evan Prater. I know a lot of fans were frustrated after his first 2 starts. It's 2 starts. And they weren't in the most ideal situations. The quarterback battle, I think the Bearcats are in good hands with. Because Emory Jones has experience. And if worse comes to worse, Ben Bryant has started a full season with Cincinnati. Now, then again, that was with Mike Denbrock, Gino Guidugli his offensive coordinator. But I do think that Prater still has something left in him. And it would not shock me if just maybe he was a major factor in this quarterback battle this offseason. Because I don't think he's been given a fair chance just yet. As far as being a starter. To win the battle, yes, he was given a fair chance. He didn't win it. But as far as being a starter, again, sometimes you got to be thrusted in there and make it work. Nick Foles did. Jeff Hostetler did, just to name, a couple examples. I think about Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship game. He made it work. So there is still a lot at stake in this quarterback battle. But I do think not only is it important for this season, but for next season. Because Jones is not going to be here, Bryant's not going to be here. You're going to have a young room. But imagine Evan Prater going into year 5, and you're still questioning a lot of things about him. That's not a situation I want to be talking about next year on this podcast. And maybe Prater doesn't play, but he improves in practice. That's something I can get behind. And then you have an experienced guy in Prater or a young guy with potential in Brady Drogosh, a lot of upside. All right, coming up, we're going to switch gears to the hardwood. Bearcats with a win last night over Tulsa. There's one thing the Bearcats men's basketball team has gotten really good at this season. I'll explain what that is next after I tell you why this episode, or how rather, this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories? And you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't even think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution. Are we still talking about New Year's resolutions on February 3rd? Now, what makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they are all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably good flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And you know, you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Well, now you can just go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Built Bar, revolutionizing deliciousness while maintaining healthiness. Cincinnati beating Tulsa last night, or rather Wednesday night, 81. Did I say last night in segment 2? Well, okay. Wednesday night, 81-55. They're now 15-8 on the season, 6-4 in the American Athletic Conference. This is a really good win for the Cincinnati Bearcats. A really good win. You beat a bad team. And what was really impressive to me about this game was the Bearcats got better as the game wore on. They didn't have a great first half. It was an uneven first half. Bearcats were behind at some points. Then they got going. They scored 36 points in the first half. You're feeling good, up 18, 45 in the second half. 45 points in the second half. That's what great teams do. They improve throughout the game. The Bearcats shot just 13 of 34 in the first half, 18 of 33 in the second half, 4 of 16 from 3 in the first half, 5 of 12 in the second half. Rebounding margin, they won that. Bearcats by 12, 44-32. They had 22 assists to 6 turnovers. Tulsa had just 5 assists to 12 turnovers. And if you look at the numbers individually from this game, a 26-point win, only meeting between these two teams this season. Cincinnati last night, 9 assists from David DeJulius. He was 1 assist shy of a double-double. 5 assists from Micah Adams-Woods. Great to see him scoring more last night, 10 points. 3 from Landers Nolley. He had a double-double, 13 points, 13 rebounds. Off shooting night, 5 of 16, but still made up for it with those 13 rebounds. An assist for Locken, Oguama, Davenport, Skillings Jr., and CJ Anthony. He had that assist on the dunk to, Kalui Zikpe. By the way, Kalui Zikpe last night was really good. 6 points, 4 rebounds, 2 of 3 from the floor in 11 minutes. So great to see him maybe starting to get some confidence back, settle in a little bit. But what stood out to me last night, aside from the Bearcats getting better throughout the game, Jeremiah Davenport, really, really prolific, solid game. 20 points, 6 of 11 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3. Bearcats, and that was off the bench. Bearcats overall, 35 points off the bench total. 5 players in double figures. This is the kind of depth we were hoping for from this team. Now, what this team is doing this year, compared to last year, is that they're beating up on bad teams. They've done it this year to Louisville, who is awful. NJIT, they beat up on Bryant. Now that, again, they were missing 6 players due to, I think, an illness. They beat up on Miami, Ohio. They beat LaSalle, Detroit Mercy, East Carolina, SMU, USF, and now Tulsa. Every game that I just mentioned, plus the first 3 games of the season against Chaminade, Cleveland State, and EKU, every game but one that they should have won this season has been by 10 points or more, and that was the SMU game on the road. And that was a game that I think they needed to play in and find a way to win, and they did. Look at last year, right? They lost to Monmouth at home, and I think that was a real turning point in the season last year because they had just come off a great performance in the Hall of Fame Classic. They beat number 14 Illinois, and then they played Arkansas tough as nails, come up just short, and it took away everything they accomplished in the Hall of Fame Classic when they lost to Monmouth at home. They barely squeaked by Miami, Ohio. They struggled with Ashland. They struggled with Tennessee Tech. Then they get to conference play. They only split with USF. They split with Tulsa. It took a game winner at ECU and a stop at Wichita State to win those games. Yeah, they swept those 2 teams, but no victory was by double digits. And against teams who finished below Cincinnati, only 3 finished below Cincinnati in the conference last year. They only went 4-2. This year, against teams below them in the conference, they're 5-0. They have a win over Tulane, a close call with Memphis, and 2 battles against Houston. So this team is making improvements. And I think you have to see that. You can say it should have been something you saw last year, but they are beating teams they are supposed to beat. That's the first step. You can't lose a game to a team you're supposed to beat. Now, you can criticize the Bearcats for their performance against NKU or Temple, whatever. Most of the games this season they've played that they should have won, they have won. Now, tomorrow is going to be an interesting game. The Bearcats against the UCF Knights. UCF, who is reeling entering this game, they are 13-8 and 4-5 in the American Athletic Conference. They've lost 4 straight games. Tulane, USF, those were both road games. Number 3, Houston at home, and then an overtime loss at home against Temple last Saturday. But before that, They had started conference play 4-1, only lost a 6-point loss at number 3 Houston. And they beat Memphis at home in double overtime, 107-104. Talk about a high-scoring game between those two teams. So the Bearcats are going to have a challenge tomorrow against the USF team who is going to come in desperate. The Bearcats last year played UCF just one time. They lost that game. But they're very good against UCF at home. Outside of that one loss in 2020, which really shouldn't have happened. The Knights, as I've said, and this is a game, this is what I call a blood in the water game. The Bearcats have momentum. UCF does not. UCF's lost 4 in a row. I mean, that's reeling. And you look at their schedule coming up. I mean, they've got the Bearcats, they're at Wichita State, they're home against Tulsa, they're at Memphis, then they played the Bearcats again. Their schedule does lighten up a little bit, although they still have to go to Temple. But this is a game, I just look at this game, and I just think the Bearcats have to put the pedal to the metal and stomp on UCF's throats in this game. Now, the Knights, they do have some talent. They've got 4 double-digit scorers, led by Taylor Hendricks at 14 points a game. He also is their leading rebounder at 7.2 points a game. The Knights shoot 42% from the floor, but their opponents shoot 40.8. They have more turnovers than assists. Their opponents do too. It's weird. So UCF has 13.5 assists per game, but 13.8 turnovers per game. Their opponents have 12.4 assists per game. They have 12.4 assists per game, UCF does, but their opponents have 14.1 turnovers per game. So this is going to be a really good test for the Cincinnati Bearcats. It's a blood in the water game because, like I said, the Bearcats have the momentum. They just played 2 really tough teams, and what they showed was what they did against Houston, they can carry that over. And just maybe, hey, Jeremiah Davenport's starting to find some rhythm. I really, really like what I'm seeing from this Bearcats team. I really do. They're 15-8. They're 6-4 in American Athletic Conference play. If they can find a way to get a win on Saturday, get to 7-4 in conference play, because you're still chasing a lot of teams in front of you. Houston's 8-1. Temple's 8-2, Memphis 7-2, Tulane 7-3. Big game next Tuesday. If you can find a way to finish off that sweep against Tulane, get up to that 4 spot, you're one step closer towards getting into that top 3 and then avoiding Houston until the conference championship game. We're now talking about that. It's good to be talking about that. It's good to be talking about where you're playing in the conference tournament as far as seeding goes. Because outside of last year, the Bearcats had played in 4 straight conference championship games. And that should be a standard that we reobtain and strive for once again. Noon tip tomorrow, that will be on ESPNU. Looking forward to that. Of course, that game can also be heard on 700 WLW. So really looking forward to watching the game. Looking forward to talking about it with you next week. Of course, so much more on the football front. So much more on the quarterback battle. We are in off-season mode, but the train keeps on rolling, and I'm honored to be with you. I'm fired up to be with you. So happy that we're now over 700 subscribers on YouTube, and I will be home in Cincinnati for good next weekend. So a lot of good things happening right now in Locked On Bearcats. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. How about for your second listen, you check out Locked On College Basketball. It's our brand new podcast with experts Isaac Shade and Anthony Patton, bringing you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, here for big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. As for me, I'm on Twitter at Frankie_90 with 2 N's and an ATI. I'm on Instagram, AlexFrank_, and email at alexbfrank@gmail.com. Locked On Bearcats is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Have a great weekend. I'll be back with you on Monday right here on Locked On Bearcats.